The Crithian warships appeared in the sky above New Haven like dark clouds blocking out the sun. Commander Daniel Hayes stood at the main observation window of the research station, watching the massive vessels take position around the small human colony. His coffee had gone cold in his hand, but he didn't notice. He had seen ships like these before, but never this many, and never aimed at him. The communication panel beeped. Hayes set down his cup and accepted the incoming transmission. A tall alien appeared on the screen, its reptilian features twisted in what Hayes had learned to recognize as contempt. The Crithian scales were a deep purple, marking him as high-ranking military. "Human Station Commander," the alien said, its translator making the words sound harsh and clipped. "I am Supreme Commander Varikthar of the Crithian Dominion. You have 1 standard hour to evacuate your colony and surrender this world to Crithian control. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction." Hayes kept his face calm, though his heart was racing. "Supreme Commander, this is a research station. We have no military capability. New Haven is a registered human colony under Galactic settlement law. You have no legal claim to this world." Varikthar's laugh was like rocks grinding together. "Legal claim? You humans speak of laws as if they matter. We are the Crithian Dominion. We control over 400 star systems. What are you? A species that has been in space for barely 50 years with no weapons, no warships, no power. You are children playing at exploration while the real powers of the galaxy conduct our business. This world sits on the border of our territory and we are claiming it. Leave now or die." "I need to consult with my superiors," Hayes said quietly. "Please give us time to evacuate our civilians." "You have 1 hour," Varikthar repeated. "After that we will demonstrate what happens to those who stand in our way." The screen went dark. Hayes stood still for a moment, then reached for his personal communicator. His hands were steady as he activated the encryption protocols that he had hoped he would never need to use. The message was short, just 7 words, but he knew they would change everything. "Protocol Midnight is active. First blood drawn." He had barely sent the message when the station shook. Alarms blared throughout the complex. Hayes ran to the tactical display and felt his stomach drop. The agricultural dome, the largest structure in the colony, was gone, just gone. Where 300 meters of transparent steel and living plants had been, there was now only twisted metal and vacuum. Dr. Helen Morrison burst into the command center, her face pale. "Daniel, the ag dome. We had 17 people working in there. They're all dead." Hayes gripped the edge of the console. 17 people. 17 researchers who had come to New Haven to study alien plants, to find new food sources, to make life better for humanity. Now they were dead because some alien empire wanted to flex its muscles. "Get everyone to the emergency shelters," he said, his voice hard. "Now." As Morrison ran to organize the evacuation, Hayes opened a channel to the Crithian flagship. Varikthar's face appeared again, looking pleased with himself. "You murdered 17 unarmed civilians," Hayes said quietly. "I gave you a warning," the alien replied. "You have 43 minutes remaining. I suggest you use them wisely." Hayes closed the channel. He walked to the observation window and looked up at the Crithian ships. They looked so confident, so sure of their power. They had no idea what was coming. On the Crithian flagship, Varikthar was already celebrating his victory. Junior Officer Kelsis stood at his station, monitoring the human colony's communications, and something was bothering him. "Supreme Commander," Kelsis said carefully, "the humans sent an encrypted message just before we fired. I cannot break the encryption, but the fact that they had military-grade encryption suggests..." "Suggests nothing," Varikthar interrupted. "Even primitive species have secrets they wish to keep. What matters is that they have no ships, no weapons, no defenses. Look at their station. Basic shields, simple construction, no weapon systems. They are exactly what they appear to be, weak." Kelsis returned to his console, but the unease remained. He began reviewing the intelligence files on humans. There wasn't much. Humans had appeared in the galaxy 30 years ago, making first contact with the peaceful Valorians. Since then, they had established trade relations, set up research stations, and sent out colony ships. They seemed friendly, curious, and completely non-threatening. But there was one file that caught Kelsis's attention. a historical document that had been flagged as potentially irrelevant by Krithian intelligence. It described something called the Unity Wars, a series of conflicts on Earth that had ended about 50 years ago. Kelsis opened the file and started reading. His eyes widened as he saw the casualty figures. The Unity Wars had killed 2 billion humans. 2 billion. The fighting had lasted for 20 years and nearly destroyed Earth's biosphere. Kelsis looked at those numbers and felt cold. The entire Krithian military, across all 400 systems, numbered about 5 million soldiers. Humans had lost 2 billion people in a war with themselves. "Supreme Commander," Kelsis said, his voice urgent now, "I think we should reconsider this action. The humans have a history of enough," Varikthar snapped. "I do not care what the humans did to each other in their primitive past. What matters is what they can do now, and right now they can do nothing. Focus on your duties, junior officer, or I will find someone who can." Kelsis fell silent, but he kept reading. There was more in the file. References to weapons that could level cities, orbital bombardment platforms, chemical and biological agents, nuclear devices. The Unity Wars had ended when Earth's remaining nations, horrified by what they had done to themselves, had finally come together under a single government. The new unified Earth had destroyed most of its weapons and turned its attention to the stars, seeking a fresh start. But destroyed wasn't the same as forgotten. Kelsis looked at the human colony below and wondered if the Krithians had just made a terrible mistake. On Earth, Admiral Patricia Griffin was in a meeting when the alert came through. The 3-star general stopped mid-sentence as every military communicator in the room chimed simultaneously. Griffin pulled out her tablet and read the message. Her face went pale, then hard. "This meeting is over," she said. "Defense Council convenes in 10 minutes. Priority Alpha." 20 minutes later, Griffin stood at the head of a conference table surrounded by the highest-ranking military officers in the Earth Defense Force. The room was deep underground, in a bunker that had been built during the Unity Wars and updated with every new technology since. "Protocol Midnight has been activated," Griffin said without preamble. "New Haven was attacked by the Krithian Dominion approximately 40 minutes ago. 17 civilians are dead. Commander Hayes reports that the Krithian fleet is still in orbit, waiting for the colony to surrender." General Raymond Cole, the oldest person in the room and one of the few who had actually fought in the Unity Wars, leaned forward. "Do we know why the Krithians attacked?" "Territorial expansion," Griffin replied. "They want the system and they assumed we couldn't stop them." "Can we?" asked Colonel Sandra Lewis, the youngest officer present. Griffin looked at her. "Yes, the question is whether we should." The room fell silent. Everyone there knew what Protocol Midnight meant. For 50 years, humanity had maintained a careful deception. After first contact, when humans realized that most alien species had evolved on gentler worlds and had far less aggressive natures, a decision had been made at the highest levels of government. Humanity would present itself as peaceful, scientific, and harmless. Meanwhile, in secret, Earth would build and maintain a military force capable of defending human space against any threat. The Hidden Fleet had been waiting for this moment. 200 warships, each one a masterpiece of weapons technology refined from the lessons of the Unity Wars. Crews trained in simulators, ships hidden in the dark spaces between stars, weapons platforms concealed in asteroid fields. For 50 years, humanity had projected weakness while building strength. "We chose to hide what we were," General Cole said quietly. "We did it because we didn't want to be seen as monsters. We wanted a fresh start. But 17 people just died because we were too successful in that deception. If we reveal what we've built, we can never take it back. The galaxy will know what humans are capable of." "And if we don't," Griffin asked, "how many more colonies will be attacked? How many more people will die because other species think we're easy prey?" Colonel Lewis spoke up. "Ma'am, we built these ships for a reason. We hoped we'd never need them, but we always knew we might. The Krithians fired first. They killed civilians. If we don't respond, we're betraying everyone who trusted Earth to protect them." Griffin looked around the table. She saw agreement on every face. "Then we're decided. Colonel Lewis, activate the 3rd Expeditionary Group. General Cole, start bringing the defense platforms online. I want every ship, every weapon, every asset ready to deploy within 6 hours. And someone get me Captain Shaw. It's time to wake up the Valiant." In the frozen darkness of space beyond New Haven's Kuiper Belt, something was changing. A massive object that had been drifting for years, its heat signature reduced to match the cosmic background radiation, suddenly came to life. Internal reactors that had been running on minimal power for decades surged to full capacity. Lights flickered on throughout the enormous vessel. Computer systems that had been dormant began their startup sequences. In the crew quarters, Captain Vincent Shaw opened his eyes as the stasis pod released him. The disorientation of suspended animation faded quickly, pushed aside by years of training and preparation. He was 53 years old, but he had only been awake for 20 of those years. The rest of the time, he had been waiting for the day humanity might need the ship he commanded. Shaw pulled himself out of the pod and moved through the ship with practiced efficiency. Around him, 2,000 crew members were emerging from their own stasis. They moved to their stations without needing orders, each person knowing exactly what their job was. They had drilled for this scenario 1,000 times in simulators before going into stasis. On the bridge, Shaw settled into the captain's chair and brought up the tactical display. The Krithian fleet was visible in orbit around New Haven, 27 ships arranged in a standard blockade formation. They were using active sensors, completely confident that there were no threats in the system. "Status report," Shaw ordered. Lieutenant Kyle Barnes looked up from the weapons console. He was young, only 26, and this was his first real deployment. "All primary systems online, sir. Railguns charging, missile tubes loaded, point defense grid active. We're at 80% combat readiness and climbing." "Good. Helm, plot an intercept course. Bring us in slowly. I want them to see us coming." The EDS Valiant began to move. At 2 kilometers long and massing over 10 million tons, it was the largest ship humanity had ever built. It was also one of 20 like it, each one hiding in a different system, each one waiting for the day it might be needed. The ship's hull was angular and aggressive, designed to deflect sensor scans and incoming fire. It bristled with weapons, railguns that could fire projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed, missile launchers loaded with warheads that could crack asteroids, point defense lasers, and systems that the Krithians had never even conceived of. As the Valiant accelerated toward New Haven, its AI came fully online. The artificial intelligence, named Athena, had been running combat simulations for 50 years. She knew every tactical scenario, every possible engagement, every way the coming battle could unfold. "Captain," Athena said, her voice calm and precise. "Analysis of the Krithian formation suggests standard military doctrine. They are using energy shields optimized for dispersing plasma and laser fire. Their weapons appear to be conventional for their technology level. Recommendation: open engagement with kinetic weapons. Their shields are not designed to handle solid mass at high velocity." "Understood," Shaw replied. "Barnes, prepare to fire on my command. Target their lead ship. I want to send a message." On the Krithian flagship, alarms suddenly began blaring. Kelsis stared at his sensor display in disbelief. "Supreme Commander, contact, unknown vessel approaching from the outer system. Mass reading is off the scale. Energy signature indicates military-grade reactors. They're arming weapons." Varekthar rushed to look at the display. "What is that? Where did it come from?" "I don't know, sir. It wasn't there 10 minutes ago. It's like it just appeared out of nowhere." "Hail them," Varekthar ordered. "Demand identification." The communication came through immediately, as if the unknown ship had been waiting for contact. A human appeared on the screen, wearing a dark uniform that Varekthar had never seen before. The human's expression was cold and hard. "This is Captain Vincent Shaw of the Earth Defense Ship Valiant. You have attacked a human colony and murdered human civilians. This is your only warning. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded, or we will destroy you." Varekthar laughed, though it sounded forced even to his own ears. "One ship against 27. Human, you are brave but foolish. Stand down before we." Shaw made a cutting gesture and the channel closed. On the Valiant's bridge, the captain looked at his weapons officer. "Lieutenant Barnes, you have the honor of firing the first shot in defense of humanity against an alien aggressor. Make it count." Barnes took a breath, then pressed the firing control. The Valiant's forward railgun spoke. There was no sound in the vacuum of space, but the ship shuddered slightly as massive projectiles were magnetically accelerated to 17% of light speed. The Crithian flagship's shields flared as they detected incoming objects. The energy barriers, designed to dissipate the energy of plasma bolts and laser beams, activated at full strength. The kinetic projectiles hit the shields and punched straight through them as if they weren't there. Solid tungsten penetrators, each one weighing 5 tons, traveling at 50,000 kilometers per second, struck the flagship's hull. The first projectile tore through the forward section, the kinetic energy vaporizing metal and creating an explosion of superheated debris. The second hit amidships, penetrating deep into the ship's interior before the shockwave tore the vessel in half. The third and fourth shots hit the engine section, and the flagship's reactor containment failed. The explosion lit up the space around New Haven like a second sun. On the other Crithian ships, panic set in. Commanders screamed orders. Ships tried to turn, to run, to get their weapons online. But the Valiant was already firing again. Barnes worked his console with precision, selecting targets and firing in a steady rhythm. Each railgun shot was a kill. The Crithian shields couldn't stop them. The Crithian armor couldn't resist them. Ships died. Kelsis, on one of the surviving Crithian vessels, watched in horror as his fleet was systematically destroyed. "We have to run," he shouted at his captain. "Engage faster than light drives. Get us out of here." The captain nodded frantically and gave the order. Throughout the Crithian fleet, ships activated their FTL systems, and nothing happened. The drives spun up, but the ships didn't move. They were trapped in normal space. "Unknown interference," the chief engineer reported. "Something is preventing dimensional transition. We cannot jump." On the Valiant, Shaw watched the Crithian ships trying desperately to escape. "Quantum disruption mines are working as designed," Athena reported. "The enemy cannot achieve faster than light travel while within the affected zone." "Good," Shaw said. "Barnes, cease fire. Let one of them go. I want them to carry a message home." Barnes stopped firing. Of the 27 Crithian ships, 23 were destroyed or drifting hulks. 3 were crippled but intact. Shaw selected the least damaged of the survivors and opened a channel. "Crithian vessel, this is Captain Shaw. I'm going to let you leave. I'm deactivating the FTL suppression field along a corridor that will allow you to jump out of this system. When you get home, you tell your leaders exactly what happened here. You attacked human civilians. We responded. You wanted a war. You have one." The Crithian ship didn't need to be told twice. As soon as the corridor opened, it jumped away, limping back toward Crithian space with the news of the disaster. Shaw turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to New Haven. Tell Commander Hayes the system is secure. Then broadcast on all frequencies. I want every species in the galaxy to know that Earth will defend its people." The news spread through human space like wildfire. For 50 years, humanity had maintained the fiction of being a peaceful, non-military society. In less than an hour, that fiction was shattered. On Mars, at the orbital shipyards, workers watched in amazement as the facilities they thought built commercial vessels suddenly revealed their true purpose. The cargo ships, under construction, split open, revealing fighter bays and weapon systems. The communications satellites being prepared for launch activated military-grade sensors and targeting systems. At the research station on Europa, Director George Palmer received new orders and codes that unlocked a hidden section of the facility. Behind false walls, he found enough weapons and ammunition to arm a battalion. The mining colony on Titan discovered that their excavation equipment could be rapidly converted into defensive installations. Everywhere humans had settled, the hidden military infrastructure came to light. Dr. Helen Morrison stood in the ruins of New Haven's agricultural dome, looking at the memorial she had just erected. 17 names carved into stone. 17 people who had died because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. She had been a scientist, dedicated to preserving life, to understanding alien biology. Now she was angry. When the military arrived to secure New Haven, Morrison volunteered immediately. "I want to help," she told the arriving Marines. "I want to make sure this never happens again." They assigned her to a research team working on weapons development. Her expertise in exotic matter made her valuable. Within a week, she had contributed to the design of a new type of bomb that could destabilize a star's fusion processes. It was a terrible weapon, one that could kill billions. Morrison looked at her design and felt sick, but she didn't stop working. She thought of those 17 names carved in stone, and she kept going. In Crithian space, the surviving ship from New Haven arrived home and delivered its report. High Counselor Drachman listened to the commander's account with growing horror. Supreme Commander Varikthar dead, 23 ships destroyed. A human warship that had appeared from nowhere and cut through Crithian forces like they were nothing. "Impossible," Drachman said. "Our intelligence reports show no human military capability. They have no warships, they have no weapons, they are traitors and scientists." "With respect, Counselor," the ship's commander said, his voice shaking, "our intelligence was wrong. The humans have been lying to us, to everyone. They have warships. They have weapons we've never seen. Their technology is beyond anything we understood, and now they're coming for us." Drachman immediately convened an emergency session of the Crithian High Council. Ambassador Thelvar, who had spent 5 years among humans studying their culture, was summoned to provide insight. "I tried to warn you," Thelvar said quietly. "I told you that humans were dangerous, that their history was soaked in blood, that they had fought wars that made our conflicts look like children squabbling, but you wouldn't listen." "How could we know?" Drachman demanded. "They showed us only peace, only curiosity, only friendship." "That was their choice," Thelvar replied, "and it was a deliberate choice. After their unity wars nearly destroyed them, humans decided to be better. They chose peace. But choosing peace is not the same as being incapable of war. It's the opposite. Only those who truly understand war can choose peace. And now you force them to remember what they are." "What do we do?" Drachman asked. "Pray they show us mercy," Thelvar said, "because they have no reason to." Admiral Griffin's 3rd Expeditionary Group emerged from dark space 2 weeks after the attack on New Haven. 200 warships, each one comparable to the Valiant, appeared in systems throughout Crithian territory. They didn't attack civilian targets. They didn't bombard planets. They simply announced their presence and waited. On the bridge of her flagship, the EDS Resolution, Griffin studied the tactical displays. The Crithian military was in chaos. They had recalled their fleets, trying to defend their core worlds, but they had no idea how to fight an enemy that used weapons and tactics they had never encountered. Crithian plasma cannons and energy shields were optimized for the kind of warfare that was common in the galaxy. Long-range energy exchanges, battles of attrition where ships pounded each other's shields until one side gave up. Human weapons were different. They were kinetic, chemical, nuclear. They were weapons developed in a crucible of total war, refined by a species that had nearly exterminated itself. The Crithians didn't have defensive systems designed to stop solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. They didn't have countermeasures against missiles that could maneuver and adjust their approach. They didn't have experience with enemies that combined overwhelming firepower with surgical precision. Kelsis, promoted to senior officer after the destruction of so many of his superiors, analyzed every engagement between human and Crithian forces. What he found terrified him. The humans were winning, but that wasn't the scary part. The scary part was that they were winning while holding back. Every human attack was precise, calculated, minimal. They destroyed military targets and nothing else. When a Crithian ship surrendered, the humans accepted the surrender and provided medical assistance to the survivors. When a human missile locked onto a Crithian vessel that was near a civilian station, the missile self-destructed rather than risk collateral damage. The humans were fighting with restraint. They could have glassed Crithian planets. They could have turned this into a war of extinction, but they weren't. They were teaching a lesson, not seeking genocide. Kelsis brought his analysis to what remained of the Crithian military leadership. "We can't win this war," he said bluntly. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that the humans don't want to win. They want us to surrender. Every action they've taken has been designed to minimize casualties while demonstrating their superiority. They're giving us a chance to end this. Why? Asked one of the admirals. Why would they show restraint after we attacked them? Because, Kelsis said, looking at the data, they've done this before, to themselves. Look at their history. The Unity Wars ended not because one side won, but because all sides realized they were destroying their own future. The humans learned how to wage total war, and then they learned how to choose not to. That's what makes them dangerous, not their weapons, their wisdom. The final confrontation came when Admiral Griffin's fleet arrived at the Krithian homeworld. Every defensive platform, every ship, every weapon the Krithians could muster was positioned to defend their home planet. It was an impressive display of force. It was also completely inadequate. Griffin's fleet bypassed the defenses with contemptuous ease. Quantum disruption fields prevented the defense platforms from firing. Electronic warfare systems shut down entire squadrons of Krithian fighters. The human fleet took up positions around the planet, weapons armed but not firing, and waited. Griffin herself delivered the message. It was broadcast on every frequency, transmitted to every receiver on the planet below and every ship in orbit. "People of the Krithian Dominion," she said, her voice calm and measured. 50 years ago, my species nearly destroyed itself. We fought a war that killed 2 billion people. We poisoned our planet. We turned our cities into graveyards. We did this to ourselves out of greed, hatred, and pride. When the war finally ended, we looked at what we had done and we made a choice. We chose to be better. We chose peace. Griffin paused, letting that sink in. We didn't choose peace because we were weak. We chose it because we knew the cost of war. We knew it better than any species in this galaxy. And when we met you, when we met all the other species, we made another choice. We chose to hide what we were. We chose to appear harmless, peaceful, scientific. We did this not to deceive you, but to avoid frightening you. We wanted a fresh start. Another pause. You attacked us. You killed 17 unarmed civilians who were trying to make life better for all species through their research. You did this because you thought we were weak. You were wrong. We are not weak. We have never been weak. We have simply been choosing not to show our strength. Griffin's expression hardened. This is our ultimatum. You will surrender unconditionally. You will pay reparations to the families of those who died at New Haven. You will sign a treaty recognizing human space as inviolate and agreeing to peaceful coexistence. If you agree to these terms, this war ends today. If you refuse, we will show you what total war looks like. We will show you what humans are capable of when we stop holding back. The choice is yours. You have 6 hours to decide. On the planet below, the Krithian High Council convened an emergency session. They looked at the human fleet in orbit, at the casualty reports from every engagement, at the technological analysis that showed just how outmatched they were. The debate lasted less than an hour. They surrendered. Commander Daniel Hayes watched from the rebuilt New Haven station as the treaty was signed. The dome had been repaired. New researchers were arriving to replace those who had died. Life was returning to normal, or what passed for normal now that the galaxy knew the truth about humanity. Lieutenant Kyle Barnes, decorated for his actions during the battle, requested a transfer to New Haven. He wanted to understand what he had been fighting for, to see the place where 17 people died and changed the course of human history. Hayes gave him a tour of the station, ending at the memorial. "Do you think it was worth it?" Barnes asked, looking at the names carved in stone. "Revealing what we are." Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he said finally. "We tried to be better than our history. We tried to leave the violence behind, but maybe that was naive. Maybe the galaxy needed to see our teeth before they could respect our handshake." "I killed people," Barnes said quietly. "I know they were enemy combatants. I know they attacked us first, but I still killed them. I'm the first human to kill aliens in warfare. That's my legacy now." "Your legacy," Hayes said, "is that you defended your people, that you did your duty, that you fought with precision and restraint in a situation where many would have sought revenge. Be proud of that." Dr. Morrison joined them at the memorial. She had returned to New Haven, but she was different now. The work she had done on weapons development had changed her. She understood now what the old veterans of the Unity Wars had tried to tell her, that sometimes good people have to do terrible things to protect what matters. "I finished the memorial project," she said. "It's not just names anymore. I added a quote." She gestured to the stone. Below the 17 names, new words had been carved. "We sought peace, but we never forgot how to fight." Captain Shaw arrived a week later, his ship docked at New Haven for resupply. He met with Hayes, and the two veterans shared a quiet drink in the station commander's office. "Do you think we'll have to do this again?" Hayes asked. "Eventually," Shaw said. "There are always going to be species that mistake kindness for weakness, but maybe fewer of them now. Word has spread. Everyone knows what happened to the Crithians. They know what humans can do." "And what do you think they'll do with that knowledge?" Shaw smiled grimly. "Some will fear us, some will respect us. Some will probably try to match our capabilities, which will make the galaxy a more dangerous place. But maybe some will learn the lesson we were trying to teach all along, that strength is meaningless without restraint, that the most dangerous weapon is the one you never have to fire." 6 months after the war ended, the galactic community was still adjusting to the new reality. The friendly human traders were still friendly, but now everyone knew that behind that smile was the potential for devastating violence. The curious human scientists were still curious, but their research stations now openly displayed defensive systems. The optimistic human colonists were still optimistic, but their colonies were now clearly military installations as well as civilian settlements. In the Galactic Assembly, a forum where species met to discuss trade and diplomacy, humans were offered a permanent seat on the Security Council. It was an acknowledgement of their military power, a recognition that any decision about galactic security had to include the species that could challenge all the others combined. Admiral Griffin attended the ceremony where Earth officially accepted the position. She stood before representatives of dozens of species and delivered a short speech. "Humanity accepts this responsibility with humility and purpose," she said. "We know the cost of war. We know the price of peace. We will use our strength not to dominate but to protect, not to conquer but to preserve. We ask only that you judge us not by what we can do but by what we choose to do." After the ceremony, Ambassador Thelvar approached Griffin. The Crithian diplomat had been assigned as his species' permanent representative to Earth, a position that was part punishment and part honor. "Do you think this outcome was inevitable?" he asked. "That eventually humanity would have to reveal its true nature?" Griffin considered the question. "Maybe," she said. "We tried to hide it, but you can't hide what you are forever. The truth has a way of coming out. I just wish it hadn't cost 17 lives." "Those 17 lives may have saved billions," Thelvar said. "If the war had continued, if humans had been forced to escalate further, the death toll would have been catastrophic. Your restraint, your precision, your refusal to seek vengeance even when it would have been understandable, that saved my species. Perhaps that is the real lesson, that the most dangerous species is not the one with the biggest weapons, but the one that knows when not to use them." Griffin smiled slightly. "I hope the galaxy remembers that." "They will," Thelvar assured her. "How could they forget? You showed them your teeth, Admiral, but you also showed them your mercy. That is a combination that inspires respect, not just fear." On Earth, in the deep underground bunker where the Defense Council met, the debates continued. The era of hiding was over. Humanity's military capabilities were now public knowledge. The question was what to do next. General Cole, nearing retirement after a lifetime of service, argued for transparency. "We can't go back to the way things were," he said. "Everyone knows we have weapons now. The only question is whether we're honest about them or try to hide again. I say we're honest. We tell the galaxy exactly what we have, exactly what we can do, and exactly what our intentions are. Transparency builds trust." Colonel Lewis, promoted to general after her role in activating the expeditionary groups, disagreed. "With respect, sir, transparency has limits. If we reveal all our capabilities, we give potential enemies the information they need to develop countermeasures. We should be honest about our willingness to defend ourselves, but not about every weapon in our arsenal." Admiral Griffin listened to both arguments. Finally, she spoke. "We need a middle path. We're honest about what we are. a species with a military heritage that we've chosen to restrain. We're clear about our defensive capabilities being substantial, but we don't provide a complete inventory. We're not hiding anymore, but we're not giving away every advantage either. We're being truthful about our character while maintaining operational security. The Council agreed. The new policy was simple. Humanity would acknowledge its military strength, would be honest about its history and capabilities in general terms, but would maintain secrecy about specific systems and deployments. The galaxy would know humans could fight. They wouldn't know exactly how many ships were hidden in dark space, or what new weapons were being developed, or where all the defense platforms were hidden. Back at New Haven, life continued. New researchers arrived, drawn by the station's reputation and the important work being done there. The memorial to the 17 dead became a place of pilgrimage, visited by humans and aliens alike who wanted to understand the turning point in galactic history. Commander Hayes remained in command, though he was offered promotions and transfers. He felt a responsibility to the place, to the people who had died under his watch. Lieutenant Barnes joined the station's security force, finding purpose in protecting the researchers who were carrying on the work of those who had fallen. Dr. Morrison returned to her botanical research, but she maintained her security clearance and occasionally consulted on weapons projects. She had learned that she could be both a scientist and a defender, that creating life and protecting it sometimes required understanding death. Captain Shaw and the crew of the Valiant returned to their hiding place in dark space, but they didn't go back into stasis. The ship remained on active duty, patrolling human space, a visible reminder of humanity's capabilities. Shaw found that he preferred it this way. For years he had waited in frozen sleep, hoping he would never be needed. Now he was awake, active, part of the ongoing mission to protect humanity. It felt right. The Crithian Dominion struggled to rebuild. The war had been short but devastating. Their fleet was shattered, their economy strained by reparations, their pride broken. But Ambassador Thelvar worked tirelessly to improve relations with humanity. He understood that the future of his species depended on learning to coexist with the humans, on accepting them as equals rather than viewing them as threats or prey. Slowly, carefully, Crithians and humans began to interact again. Trade resumed. Cultural exchanges were established. Some Crithians even came to Earth, wanting to understand the species that had defeated them. They visited the monuments to the Unity Wars, saw the cities that had been destroyed and rebuilt, learned the history of a species that had nearly destroyed itself and chose to be better. One young Crithian, visiting the ruins of what had been called Lowe's Angels, stood before a memorial listing the names of the dead from that city alone. Millions of names. He turned to his human guide and asked, "How did you survive this? How did you come back from such horror?" The guide, an elderly woman who had been a child during the Unity Wars, smiled sadly. "We remembered that we were all human, that the people on the other side were not monsters, just people who were afraid and angry and desperate. Once we remembered our common humanity, once we started seeing each other as people again instead of enemies, peace became possible." "And do you see us as people?" the young Crithian asked. "After what we did?" "Yes," the woman said simply. "You made a mistake. Your leaders were arrogant and foolish, but you're not your leaders. You're just a person trying to understand. That's how peace starts." The young Crithian returned home with a new perspective. He joined the diplomatic service, dedicated to ensuring that the mistake his species had made would never be repeated. He was one of many. A new generation of Crithians grew up knowing that the galaxy was more complex than their parents had believed. That strength came in many forms, and that the most powerful species was not necessarily the one that conquered others, but the one that chose not to. In the wider galaxy, the revelation of human military capabilities sent shockwaves through every government. Species that had been considering expansion into human space quietly abandoned those plans. Pirates who had viewed human ships as soft targets found themselves hunted by vessels that could outfight anything in their fleets. Border disputes that might have escalated were settled peacefully when both sides realized that neither wanted to draw human attention. But it wasn't all fear. Some species saw humanity's combination of strength and restraint as admirable. They sought closer ties with Earth, wanting to learn from a species that had mastered the art of war so completely that they could choose peace. Military exchanges were established. Human officers taught alien cadets about tactics and strategy. In return, humans learned from species who had different approaches to conflict resolution, different philosophies about the use of force. Admiral Griffin retired 5 years after the war. At her retirement ceremony, she stood before an assembly of human and alien officers and reflected on what had been accomplished. "We revealed ourselves because we had no choice," she said. "But perhaps that was for the best. We were living a lie pretending to be something we weren't. Now we can be honest. We are a species with a violent past. We have done terrible things, but we have also learned from those mistakes. We know the cost of war, and that knowledge makes us uniquely qualified to preserve peace." She paused, looking out at the faces before her, human and alien alike. "The greatest strength is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to know when destruction is necessary and when it is not. We showed the galaxy our weapons. Now we must show them our wisdom. We must prove that the most dangerous species in the galaxy is dangerous precisely because we know when not to be dangerous at all." The speech was met with applause, but Griffin knew that words were easy. The hard part was living up to them. As she left military service and returned to civilian life, she wondered if humanity would remember the lessons it had learned. Would future generations understand the responsibility that came with power? Or would they forget, as species so often did, and make the same mistakes their ancestors had made? Only time would tell. But for now, in this moment, humanity stood at a crossroads. The secret was out. The weapons were revealed. The choice had been made. What remained was to prove that revealing their fangs had not made humans into monsters, but had instead shown the galaxy what true strength looked like. The power to destroy, coupled with the wisdom to preserve. Commander Hayes, now approaching retirement himself, stood at the observation window of New Haven Station and looked out at the stars. Ships passed by, human and alien, trading and traveling in peace. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. But some things remained constant. "We are what we are," Hayes thought. "A species born in violence, shaped by war, tempered by near extinction. But we chose to be more than our history. We chose peace. And when that peace was threatened, we defended it with the same ferocity we once turned on ourselves." He thought of the 17 names on the memorial. They had not died in vain. Their deaths had revealed the truth, had forced humanity to confront what it was and what it wanted to be. From that revelation had come a new era, one where humans no longer hid but also no longer apologized for their strength. The most dangerous species in the galaxy, Hayes thought with a slight smile. Maybe they were right. Maybe we are. But not for the reasons they think. We're dangerous because we know ourselves. Because we've seen our own darkness and chosen the light anyway. Because we understand that the greatest victories are the wars we choose not to fight. Outside the window, the stars burned on, indifferent to the dramas of the species that dwelt among them. But humanity was no longer hiding among those stars. They were present, visible, acknowledged. Dangerous, yes, but also wise, also compassionate, also restrained. It was, Hayes decided, a legacy worth leaving. The most dangerous species in the galaxy, teaching the galaxy that danger without wisdom was just destruction, but danger with wisdom was the foundation of lasting peace. And so the story continued, written not in blood but in the careful balance between strength and mercy, between capability and restraint, between what humanity could do and what humanity chose to do. The galaxy had learned that humans were dangerous. Now humanity would teach them that dangerous could mean protector, not predator. Guardian, not conqueror. The lesson would take time, but humanity had time, and more importantly, they had learned patience along with strength. They would show the galaxy, one day at a time, one choice at a time, that congratulations were indeed in order, not for declaring war on humanity, but for surviving long enough to learn what humanity truly was, a species that knew war so well, it would do almost anything to preserve peace.